thank you all so much for being here. Our alumni panel, distinguished alumni panel, you're doing so many interesting things, and I can't wait to hear about them. My name is Eric Owens. I'm the director of the International Studies program, and about 2 weeks ago, we're recording this in early May of 2020, and about 2 weeks ago, I put out a quick email call to our alumni to see if people might help our current students and indeed future students reflect on career pathways and trajectories out into the wild world beyond Boston College. And over 120 responded like within 24 hours. It was really amazing to see. And they've offered up their services as mentors and people to reflect with or answer simple questions with. And almost all of them have agreed to be on LinkedIn and to be responsive to students and recent alumni networking requests on LinkedIn, and also on the Boston College Eagle Exchange Forum, which is a special BC only mentoring program that allows you to search out alumni by international studies or sector or whatever, and then to start a video conference there if you like, or email through that system. So thank you all who've already done that. And of course, I encourage others to be engaged in it, students and alumni as well. So first of all, a hearty thank you to everyone. Second of all, we have a terrific panel. And so because we have a lot of you here on this one panel, what we'd like to do is start with about 5 minutes of introductory remarks from everyone. That gives us a brief account of what your current job is and what your trajectory out of BC has been to get you to this place, or how you've ended up here. And then any quick words of wisdom that you have about that process or anything for students. This should leave us about 25 minutes or 20 minutes afterwards to follow up with questions. We'll open the floor for questions for the students who are on the chat right now, who are on the call right now, but also we'll circle around to other themes that might not have come up, and we'll try to consolidate some specific questions after that. So thank you all for being mindful of that 5-minute starting point. Michelle, do you mind getting us started?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Michelle Arguelles, a BC class of 2011. I am currently a senior product marketing manager at a company called SIFT. So SIFT is a fraud prevention company. We use machine learning to stop fraud on websites like Twitter, Wayfair, Yelp, DoorDash, payments fraud, account takeover, a number of fraud issues that actually have been going up in coronavirus times. Product marketing means a lot of different things at a lot of different places. At SIFT specifically, I act as kind of a general manager of my product area, which in my case is payments fraud. So I do everything from market research and sizing to identify the target audience we want to go after, collaborating with our product team on actually building the right product for that audience, and then taking that to market. So launching it, enabling our sales team, just making sure that launch is successful and we're growing our business. In between Boston College and my position now at SIFT, I started with some nonprofit work at the Asia Society of Northern California. I transitioned to be a fraud analyst at a company called WePay, which actually was founded by Boston College alumni. Was there for a number of years before joining SIFT on the sales team for the first couple of years, and then transitioning to product marketing where I am now. And I guess a nugget of advice based on my experience, be open-minded, be flexible. I think especially as the job market is looking at potentially tough. It was kind of tough when I graduated as well. But when you find that good opportunity, take it, maximize it, optimize your career for learning, ask questions, acquire adjacent skill sets where you can. As example, product marketing is an example, is a highly cross-functional function. Having carried a quota on the sales side, having done customer interaction throughout my career, all very important things, all tools to keep in your tool belt as you think about accelerating your career in kind of the early stages when you're getting started.
Okay, great, thanks. Can you tell us what year you graduated?
2011.
2011, okay, terrific. Thanks. Erin, do you mind going next?
Sure, thanks. Hey everyone, this is Erin Litwin. I'm based here out of Denver, Colorado, and after BC, I moved from Boston to New York to California, and now at the latest Colorado. So Michelle, I hear you when I say really be open in terms of the career paths. Currently, I'm working as a territory sales lead at Google Cloud here in Denver. The office here is based in Boulder, but I cover all of our Western states territory. And really, I actually started Google focusing on some of our diversity initiatives, which was nothing I had ever done in my career, but it was an opportunity to kind of leverage some of the experience that I had in banking and in sales, and take my expertise as a female in finance, and help build the representation of Google across the globe. So I've recently changed roles here. I went back into sales, and after I graduated in 2010, I went straight into finance. So I started my career at Citibank. I did the rotational analyst program for 3 years there, and then ended up sitting on a trading desk, really learning so much. Michelle, similar kind of time period as you, it sounds like. It was right after the economic crisis. We were going through a lot of tumultuous times, and just kind of working with the global economy was super interesting and really invaluable. And then I kind of wanted a little bit of a different experience. I moved across the country, went to San Francisco, worked in a fintech called Bloomberg, and did strict sales there. So worked in business development and sales for about 3 years there, and absolutely loved it. So built those skills from a customer relationship perspective, quota carrying capacity, agnostic across all different verticals. So really broad exposure and work there. And that's when I had the opportunity to move over to Google. So kicked off that career here at Google within our diversity initiatives, focusing on female tech talent. And then most recently now I'm in Google Cloud. So working on managing a team and selling cloud across the Western states.
Any other advice for students before I pass the hat over?
Yeah, I really wanted to just echo Michelle as well. I have had anything but a straight line trajectory, and sometimes I look back and say, oh, I wonder what would have happened if. I mean, I graduated with a Fulbright, and for economic reasons, for different opportunities, I actually decided to go straight into this rotational analyst program, and it was a really hard choice. And you never really know what those choices will bring, but I truly believe that where I've ended up, the experiences that I've gotten for the past 10 years of my career have been exactly what I've wanted, and have opened my eyes to things I had never known about. So, I absolutely encourage people to be flexible, be open. This is a really challenging time as well. So things might not look exactly like you planned them to look. I'm a big planner, and I always look at 1, 3, 5 year plan, and be flexible about that. Let the opportunities come to you, and give something a shot that you might never have thought of doing before.
Great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Ross, do you mind going next for us?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ross. I'm BC class of 2013. My focus within the international studies program was economics, for what it's worth. Right now I work as an engineering manager at a company called ActBlue. We build fundraising software for Democrats and progressive nonprofits. So if you've ever donated to Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, you've used our software. Coincidentally enough, we actually just did an integration with Michelle's company. So I was kind of laughing when that was happening. And kind of like Erin, I kind of find myself surprised to be saying that, because I didn't have tech in my radar at all when I was kind of finishing up at BC. So how did I get here? I was studying abroad in China my junior year, and my plan was to do language research there over the summer, and that kind of fell through. And at the last minute, I needed an internship so I could pay rent in Boston. And I kind of stumbled across ActBlue, and they had a really cool program, and so I got on board there. And so my little nugget there is, like Erin said, always have a backup plan or a contingency plan, be ready for what opportunities present themselves. When I got there, the company does something called brown bag lunches, which is pretty common, where people just present on whatever they want during a lunch hour. And I thought that was really cool, and I kind of wanted to be noticed. And so I recycled a development economics presentation I had done for a BC class. I think it was about an RCT that was done on child nutrition in India or something like that. And it was cool because it got me noticed at this company. And it turns out that like experiments you do in technology products for like revenue and all of this stuff turns out to look a lot like the stuff you do in development economics. And so I started talking to the people who ran Act Blue, and they were like, hey, like you should maybe think about doing data work for us after you graduate. And I was like, huh, I never thought about that. Like my path in my head was always like, okay, go do the Peace Corps, go be an RA somewhere, and then go get a PhD or whatever. And I see a lot of heads nodding, so I think that maybe sounds familiar. And so I thought it was a cool opportunity, and I took it. And one of the reasons I felt good about that was that I had people reaching out to me who were like full-time employees at this company who were like, hey, yeah, we can teach you the skill that you don't have. Like, yeah, we can help you figure out how to do that. And so my nugget there would be like, make sure you're, interviewing your employer as well. Like you want to find places that will invest in you as a person. And that's huge. I know that can feel like not the best advice in a time of like economic turmoil, but it is super important. In my opinion. What's interesting? So yeah, I kind of eased my way into doing more like software development there. And again, I found really good mentors at this company who wanted to help me grow. And throughout my time in the past couple of years, it's been great. I've been able to network a lot in the tech industry by giving talks at conferences, by going to like local meetups, always just kind of trying to meet people and make sure you're like helping people find the roles that they need, and eventually that'll kind of come back to you. So that's another thing I would say. And then kind of my last thing I want to finish up on is, again, echoing what Michelle started with, which is like, I think you said optimize for learning, which is really cool. Yeah, make sure you're always learning. Sometimes that can be like formally, like in grad school, like I'm currently doing a master's in computer science just to kind of keep my skill set moving along. But often it's informal. It's stuff you do at your house after work that might not even seem related to work, but will end up like helping develop you as a person. So that's going to look different for everyone, but make sure you're kind of focusing on kind of developing yourself.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Ross. I really appreciate it. Laura Schaefer, why don't you go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Laura, and I graduated class of 2014. I did a concentration in economic inequality, and I also had a minor in environmental relations. So I work in the ad tech space now for a company called June Group. We're a digital advertising platform. We have our own SDK, or software development kit. It's basically a tiny piece of code that's integrated into hundreds of apps. And that's where we show our users our ads. And then in addition to that, we also create like digital experiences for our clients. So think like augmented reality experiences or microsites, things like that. And I've been at June Group for the past 5 years. I just moved into a role in product marketing, actually, so similar to some other people who've gone. So I'll be responsible for developing our go-to-market strategy, working with the product and tech team, making sure that we're staying up on technology like that we're investing in is right for our clients at the right time. So when I graduated from BC, similar to a lot of people, I had no idea I was going to get into a job in tech or advertising. I had never taken a coding course, didn't know any HTML or CSS, no business or communication courses either. I really wanted a position where I was going to be challenged. And I think that's one of the most important things that I know a lot of, at least, the people I know in the IS program, that's really what we all, I would say, have in us, is that we're like curious people. And I think that finding an industry where you can continue to learn is so important. So for me, that was digital advertising. I had a connection and kind of fell into a role for a video ad tag provider. So they basically create the tracking that anytime you see a video ad, so that the clients can track how many users are clicking and seeing those videos. So that really gave me like a crash course into the back end of advertising. I was able to really learn how all of the technology works and how to solve problems. So after working there for about a year, I moved to June Group, where I've been for the past 5 years. And that has been an amazing experience for me because it was a company that, similar to what a lot of people said, they've given me so many opportunities to learn and to grow, not just for the company's growth, but for my own growth. So that's really important. So I had been on a team who was responsible for kind of creating all of these ad experiences. So building out the actual the ads that will run and those other digital experiences like augmented reality. And I took over that team 2 years ago and had been in that role up until I just transitioned into this role in product marketing. So what I will leave you guys with, I think, kind of echoing what a lot of people said, you don't need to have every hard skill on like a job description to get a job or to go into an industry or even excel at that role. As a manager and from my own experience, I see that like the hard skills are trainable. I learned how to code, I learned how to do graphic design, all on the job. But what I look for when I'm hiring is someone who's curious, who's going to pick up those skills, who's hardworking, who's driven. So use that to your advantage. I know all of you guys have that, a huge advantage of that coming out of this program at BC. Second, what you say matters. So I know this was like hard for me when I first graduated. Is I sort of felt like all the decisions at a company must be made by like the adults in the room, and it's hard for you to make that transition to realize that you're that adult in the room now. And especially again coming from a place like BC, be confident in yourself, and you can really make a difference at your company and even in your industry. And then the last piece of advice that I'll give is something that I think is also pretty important to people at BC. I think that you should know that you can bring like that sense of ethical responsibility to kind of any industry or any company that you're at. I think a lot of people, at least I felt when I was graduating, like I could either go work for a nonprofit or go work for this company, but it was like very much a dichotomy. Like you couldn't sort of be ethical and work for a business. And I think that's really not true. And you'll see that when you get out in your career, that you can make a difference at your own company or in an industry like in advertising, which is filled with a lot of fraud and a lot of bad players. I know at my company, one of the reasons I love working there is truth is built into everything that we do. Our whole brand is built on June means truth in Mandarin. And we're constantly asking each other in like day-to-day decisions, even like technical decisions, is this something that's really being truthful? Are we going to be at all hiding something in how we're, changing some piece of code and how it interacts with some other company's software or something? I guess use that to follow your pursuits, and like don't let it limit you by thinking, I can only go this way or this way. You can still be men and women for others, kind of in any industry.
Thanks so much, Laura. That's great. You're, as an ethics professor, you're singing my song, right? We'll come back to questions around values later on in our conversation, I think. I'm glad you brought it up because it's an important topic for all BC grads, I think, that's on people's minds. So we'll circle back to that for sure. Since we're sort of on the edges of tech and media here, Sean, do you want to go next for us? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sean Keeley. Maybe I'm the odd one out here doing kind of strictly media. I have no tech background, but I work for a magazine called The American Interest. We're a nonpartisan magazine. We were founded in 2005 by Francis Fukuyama of End of History fame, and we do politics, foreign policy, and culture. So I'm currently a associate editor. It's a very small team. I'm one of 6 full-time staff. And basically I'm, help run some of our daily online material. We're publishing every day. I manage our print process, which is bi-monthly. So we have kind of a best of our content that goes out to subscribers 6 times a year. I also help run our podcast, which is based around new and notable books, often in the fields of history and international relations. But that's not how I started. So I I graduated from BC in the IS program in 2015. I was a political science concentration and also had a Russian minor and had a big interest in that part of the world. And I also kind of had this interest in writing and journalism from my time at the Heights. And I kind of knew I wanted to be in DC and do something related to Russia, perhaps to writing, but other than that, I really wasn't sure. I had some opportunities kind of fall through. But ultimately, I kind of moved to DC right after graduation, started working at a movie theater to help pay the bills and do an unpaid internship. And long story short, after some informational interviews, I ended up at a place called Blue Star Strategies, which is a government affairs / consulting firm, which is really great experience. It was run by a couple of veterans of the Clinton administration. And I got to do some work related to clients in Ukraine and using some of my Russian skills on research there. So I worked there for about a year and ultimately decided I was looking for something a little bit different. I still had this kind of itch for writing and analysis, and ultimately this job opened up at the American Interest that I heard about through a BC professor actually, and applied for it. And my first role there was working as a staff writer under Walter Russell Mead, doing kind of foreign policy blogging. He's now with the Wall Street Journal. So I've been there for about 3.5 years now, in a couple of different roles. So, moving from the kind of daily staff writer, blogger position into editing. And it's really been a terrific experience for me in all kinds of ways. So if I were to, offer a couple pieces of advice, a lot of it echoes what others have said, but one is it is not always a linear path. Seems to be a recurring theme, but, I really didn't know what my plans were immediately after graduation. I had a Fulbright application that didn't work out, and another job in Boston as well. But I really can't emphasize enough not to let that be cause for discouragement, just to keep looking, keep plugging away. And also, I think you can't undervalue how important it can be just to be in a place, to DC, even if you're going for a few days, just to interview people informationally. That can really help open some doors. Second point is, related, that BC connections really can be invaluable. That's been my experience, certainly, every step of the way. So one of my professors from freshman year, Martha Bayless, who teaches humanities at BC, kind of clued me in a little bit to this world of, magazines and think tanks in DC, and encouraged me right before graduation, just go down for a couple of days. She introduced me to some people I email. I did a number of interviews. And in one case, one of the people that I interviewed with is my current boss. And it's just kind of funny how life finds a way sometimes. But if I hadn't made that initial connection through BC, I might not be where I am. And there's lots of other examples I could cite there about BC people helping out. And then the third lesson for me, and this isn't a one size fits all thing, but it's just true of my experience, is I guess don't underestimate the value of a smaller company. So for me, working at a place like the American Interest gave me a lot of really personalized access to some very smart people, either my boss, who has a lot of experience both in kind of academia and the policy world, or whether it's people I'm working with and editing, some of whom I was studying in college. And also it's a place that's broad enough that allows me to kind of pick and choose a couple of key interests. So, I've always had this interest in Russia. We were pretty strong on Russia writing, and I have a number of colleagues that I work with on that to kind of keep that flame alive. Joined some young professional groups related to Russia studies. And then also I'm a huge film geek, and I love culture writing. That kind of comes from my time at the Heights. You can probably tell from the movie posters on my wall, but working at a magazine like ours, there's a lot of opportunities for writing about that kind of cultural side of things that I care a lot about. And I even help lead up a event series we do where we do film screenings that are kind of related to politics and talk about them. So last year we did an event with the Polish ambassador in DC, screening a movie and then talking with him. So I've been very lucky, I feel, in that I've been able to kind of pick and choose a couple different aspects of my my life and interests, and I've been able to thrive in a smaller environment. So
thanks so much, Sean. It's great to see you again. And Mabel, can you bring us home? You're coming out of San Francisco, right?
Yeah. Yep. So I'm Mabel. I graduated BC with a double major in international studies and economics. So right now I work at Cruise. And Cruise is a self-driving car startup. So we are majority owned by GM, but we have large investments by SoftBank and Honda. So I'm a technical program manager. I started at the company 1.5 years ago. It was around 900 people when I started. Now it's around 1,800, so it's doubled in size since I've been there. So as a technical program manager, I work primarily with the hardware engineers, so the mechanical engineers, electrical, and design engineers. I have a few different projects under my program, and I make sure that basically the engineers aren't blocked by anything. I escalate any statuses up to the senior leadership, and I manage communications between GM, SoftBank, or GM, Honda, and Cruise, our company. So I guess echoing what everyone else has said, my path has been very much nonlinear. I started out, after BC, I went into consulting, started consulting for a large Fortune 100 company doing their online customer experience for when they were starting out their online grocery business. Realized I wanted to be in tech after that, so I moved to San Francisco, worked for Rakuten, which is like the Japanese version of Amazon. I was a data analyst there, and then kind of decided that I wanted to do my Fulbright. So I moved to Taiwan, did my Fulbright for a year. Didn't really have an experience teaching English, but that was my Fulbright experience. Came back to the US, wanted to be in an impactful industry, wanted to get back into tech, but I wasn't really sure which company to go towards. I had an interest in the self-driving car industry because I knew it was very fast moving, and one of the best pieces of advice I'd gotten was if you don't really know where to go, then just go to an industry where you're kind of where it's fast growing, and you'll have a lot of impacts. And I thought the rocket ship was going to be on self-driving cars, so started applying to a lot of self-driving car companies, and I started out as an engineering analyst on the hardware side because of my background in data analytics, and slowly have moved up to become a technical program manager. So now I kind of manage a lot of different projects, and I work primarily with engineers. And similar to everyone, like I don't have any experience in engineering. A lot of the engineers I work with, like, love physics, and I haven't taken physics since high school, so it's just a completely different experience. I have to learn everything on the job. I have to Google a lot of things. So I think two main pieces of advice. I have had a lot of imposter syndrome throughout my career. Just as a 22-year-old in consulting, consulting for big corporations, and then doing my Fulbright when I had no experience teaching, and now leading a team and managing them when I don't have any experience in engineering or in mechanical engineering or in electrical engineering. So I think it's more of how you present yourself and just asking the right questions and having a mentor. And I think primarily it's working hard. When you work hard and you work hard at something, even if you don't have the right experience or the skill set, then people will recognize that and people will help you. And I think the second piece of advice is that always take the initiative. And if you ask the right questions, I kind of asked to be pivoted into the technical program manager role. I think my career trajectory could have gone either way, but it was something I was interested in. And after months and months of convincing my manager at that time that it was the right path forward for me, he moved me onto this track. So it's being able to push for yourself when you know what you want and when you need it to, but it's also being able to advocate for yourself in those situations. Yeah.
This is great. I mean, thank you all. You're doing such interesting work, and I think there's a lot of consistent themes amidst the diversity also. Let's see if the folks on the call have any questions in particular. Let's start, since they've been waiting. Amanda or Giovanni, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? If not, that's fine. Okay, well, let's start with some questions ourselves then. And getting back to the theme of some shared themes that I hear you speaking about, one of them is that you didn't expect to be where you were, that you, and in fact, many of you are operating with skill sets you didn't get at Boston College. And of course, one of the selling points of a liberal arts program is that you're learning to think, you're learning to be creative, you're learning to be adaptable, and the International Studies program is designed to be interdisciplinary, to give you a wide range of skill sets and ways of thinking amidst that liberal arts program. But I wonder if you might look back on, reflect on the education you got at Boston College. And for the students who are here, of course, they'll be doing, for the students watching, they'll be doing a million different things just like you are, and they'll find themselves downstream doing things they never expected to. When you look back at Boston College, what are some of the things that you see as especially meaningful to you with regard to being able to be the professional you are now? Classes or experiences or conversations or mentoring? We've heard a little bit of it here and there, but I wanted to home in on that and let you all reflect on that for a second. Anyone can jump in.
I'm happy to kick off. I'm sure we'll have similar responses as well. But a couple of the things that I think we heard thematically across all of us are our networks and our advocacy of ourselves. I think that Boston College was the first place in my life where I found people that were, especially within the IS program actually, that were thinking globally, that were pushing themselves to learn about different cultures, that were pushing themselves to kind of think out of the box. And I think that is what translates to being, Laura, I know you said this, curious, and to asking the right questions, and to asking all questions, and to finding out new areas that you may not have heard about. So to this day, the network that I built both internally with my classmates within IS, as well as people that were like poli-sci majors that I had traveled with during study abroad, or people that also had applied for Fulbright and things like that, I'm still friends with, and we still travel together. We still push each other. We had a hangout last week, and like 4 out of 8 of us have new jobs, are starting a master's program, are moving to Columbia. And it's just really interesting to see that, like, despite all these different paths that we've taken, we're all still passionate about that curiosity of the world, and that like cohesive network and building community. So I know for sure that the IS program taught me how to leverage and utilize my network and make friends and understand the world around me. So I'll kick off with that.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, I think I can speak to the importance of interdisciplinary education and how that works out. Like I said that my job was an engineering manager. I didn't really say what that is, but it's kind of 3 things. One is to work with people to like help them grow in their careers, and also help like our entire like team of like 50 engineers make sure stuff is working together. The second is like product, so it's like deciding what we should be building and working on. And then the third is like the hard kind of technology itself. And so like, there you have it right there. Like any kind of decision I'm making involves like priorities from like 3 different streams that I should be thinking about. So, sorry, I had another point, but I will stop there.
You can come back to it for sure. Feel free to jump in. Anyone else want to reflect on this a little?
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit. I mean, I think that, the classic answer of like, why would you major in something like IS or philosophy is the even more classic, like liberal arts major that doesn't get you a career. The corny answer is always, oh, but it teaches you critical thinking skills. And that sounds really fluffy, especially when you're trying to find a job and no one's hiring for critical thinking skills. They're hiring for accounting, they're hiring for actual sales experience, all these things that you don't have. But that stuff pays off. And I think that Laura mentioned this earlier when she's interviewing people. Like one of the things that I look for when I'm interviewing is definitely that critical thinking skill. If I'm talking to you and you say, this is how I took this product to launch and I did this and I did this to get these results. I'm like, great. Why did you do that? If you can't answer that question, I don't think you're actually thinking about what you're doing, and you're just going through the motions. And I think it's just so important to be able to connect the dots, both in terms of understanding why you would be doing what you're doing. It's a great way to speak up and challenge what you think might not be working internally within an org, and create more opportunities for yourself. I think that's the best way. If you just sit there and you're like, why is this the way it is? I can point to several times in my own career where I've asked that question, you know, and been able to create opportunities for myself. So I don't want to, because there was definitely a few months where I was like, I don't care about these critical thinking skills. I just want a job right now. So, yeah.
I would say too, you know, the IS community in particular is kind of a community within a community at BC, I find, and that it really teaches the value of kind of collegiality, and there's a lot of classes based around kind of either a seminar style or debate, learning how to interact respectfully with people rather than just doing huge lecture classes or really specialized classes. I think IS was great at fostering that sense of community, which I've seen apply to my own work, both in terms of kind of like seminar discussions and working with writers at my magazine, but also just people skills, I think are immensely valuable, knowing how to kind of navigate office relationships. And I think BC is, perhaps I'm biased, but I think uniquely good at fostering those kinds of skills.
Do the others want to jump in? No problem. Mabel?
Yeah, just a quick point off of what Sean had said. Yeah, I think it's really important for the people skills. But what I've noticed, what my IS degree has really helped me out in is just being able to write like emails and being able to craft like why we're doing something and why this why we're moving forward with a decision. Since I have to talk to senior executives a lot, I think I've seen the difference in the way I communicate versus how engineers are communicating. And I think that's what they're trying to fill the gap in terms of a career, mostly like how you're writing, how you're thinking about things, and how that differs from like STEM majors.
Great, that's a great point. While you all were speaking, it occurs to me that we have 2/3 of our panelists are women today, which is pretty much matches our traditional balance in the IS program itself. And I wonder if the women in the group, and maybe men afterwards, but if the women might speak a bit to how gender's played a role in the workplace for you, whether there was a transition out of Boston College that was challenging. The tech world is a notoriously, you know, bro-like environment, and especially in particular startup cultures, I think that might be the case, but maybe more broadly as well. And I wonder if you all might speak a bit about how you've experienced gender in the workplace and how you've responded to it.
I can kick off. So, I mean, I think that I've been very fortunate at my roles. First at WePay, again, founded by Bill Clerco and Rich Aberman, BC alums themselves. And now at SIFT, I've been a part of 2 startups that really don't have kind of the toxic culture that you hear about a lot in that, you know, tech is notorious for, I think. I've been in very open environments, very equal environments, pretty inclusive. There's always room for improvement. You know, I think the sales team is always still a majority male, and there's definitely there's definitely a little bit of code switching that has to be done between teams. But I think I've been very fortunate. I think there's a lot of places to go, both in terms of gender diversity, ethnic diversity, at the leadership level, making sure that there is more equality there. But yeah, I can't, I'll stop there because I don't have too much constructive to say about it.
Yeah, I can jump in. I similarly have had good experiences for the most part as a woman working in tech, though I think it is it's definitely a unique position where I think that even just like going to outside, like when I've interacted with going to meetups or interacting with like other tech groups, I think you often end up being the one woman in or one among very few women, and being able to explain your points well like really matters if you want to have an impact. But I think that to go back to kind of what we talked about earlier, it's important that you are interviewing the company that you're at, so that you end up at a company like where Michelle and I have ended up, where you're respected, and even in that startup culture, people are respected for their ideas and what they bring, and not just for their gender. So yeah, I think that for the most part, the way it's impacted me might be just the imposter syndrome, that sometimes I think, well, I'm not, I didn't have this undergraduate degree in computer science, and maybe I don't fit the exact, what someone would imagine to be in this role. And so I feel like I need to work extra hard in a way that's kind of a benefit. I think echoing again a lot of what people say, that's really why we've all been able to excel in our careers, is that hardworking, curiosity, we're driven, not always those hard skills or having them beforehand.
I'll jump in next. Oh, go ahead.
No, Erin, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the last 2 years I spent working on our diversity initiatives at Google. So in the professional sense, I had the opportunity to work in that capacity. And one of the reasons and one of the catalysts for doing so was because in 2010, when I started my career in finance and was working at Citibank and experienced inequalities or different types of conversations that I had never anticipated, never kind of thought of. And keep in mind, I had ended my career at Citi on a trading desk, so it was very male dominated. It's also just inherently a very aggressive, fast-paced, no mistakes type of environment. So the type of culture that Google fosters is 180 from what I experienced at Citibank. And so I would say in my career, I have like progressively gotten into better cultures, whether that be making better decisions about the companies that I was interviewing for and interviewing them as well, but also leveraging that experience. I had to be really cautious about, really cautious about my activities on a day-to-day basis, really had to work hard. I always kind of felt behind the curve, that imposter syndrome and that advocacy, but it helped me get to be, top of my analyst class and push me to get the next kind of position or opportunity within that finance world. And those skills have translated. It's interesting, over the past couple of months, I've gotten a lot of questions about what my experience was like working for Michael Bloomberg. I'm sure people have thought about what his culture of his large company is like. And quite frankly, it was worlds better than what I experienced at Citibank as well. So I truly believe that was a top-down kind of initiative, and we had access to groups and culture clubs and women representation, and really great balance across both the sales teams as well as the engineering teams. So I started to kind of see that that effort in a corporate environment. And then, here, being hired into Google to look at our female representation across the company, as well as understand attrition rates, as well as proactively make the workplace more representative of the world around us, was the first time in my career where I was like, let's take this proactive approach and really make the type of world and culture that we want and that we want to work in. So, just kind of looking at the global representation across all of our underrepresented groups. And while we're building products for the world, we want to hit we have 9 products where we have over 1 billion users. We can't just be thinking about one particular type of person or profile. We have to think out of the box there. So it was extremely, rewarding work. And I still continue to do that type of work within Google as a whole, particularly within Google Cloud right now. but one of the things that I think Google has done differently is they take a proactive approach at the challenges and the inequalities that unfortunately have inherently existed or have been, you know, traditional to our type of industry. So I'm really pleased to be in a culture and a company that really values out, you know, every person's voice, every person's opinion, isn't afraid to apologize for mistakes that we've made, but it's certainly, you know, steps ahead from where I started.
Oh, it's great to hear good stories of forward progress and equal treatment and all those things. It wasn't that I was fishing for horror stories, but more just wanted to be open, especially it's an important part of work culture that is not always discussed. And again, like many other things, students, when you're on the job hunting side, you feel like you have no choice. Sometimes you're looking for a job, not a great culture or a affirming culture or whatever. You want to make sure you get a job. And so I think it's important for people to have a little insight into workplace cultures. Sean or Ross or Mabel, do any of you want to pitch in on this topic as well?
Yeah, sorry,
Mabel,
I don't know why my video is not
go ahead. Sorry, we lost your video.
working. This happens sometimes. I think it's my laptop.
No problem.
Is it okay if I just...
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Sorry, this topic actually, like, when I started at Cruise, I was probably one of the first 10 females in the hardware department. So it was very nerve-wracking because I've been on teams where I've been the only female before, but this was like a whole department. And so when I first joined, I was it was definitely nerve-wracking. I would sometimes be in a 20-person meeting room and be the only female. And even now I find myself, like, my team is all guys. I think the ratio is different in the software engineering world versus the hardware engineering world, where it's more typically dominated by men. And so I've gotten a lot of comments that I've learned to more or less overlook over the past few months, based on not just my gender, but also probably my lack of an engineering background. But I think it's like how you advocate for yourself and how you position yourself. A lot of the engineers, as long as you talk to them logically, they'll be able to reason through your way of thinking. But I work at kind of a startup. We still consider ourselves a startup. So I see this as like a way to be able to implement change as we move in our hyper growth stage. I've talked to a lot of the recruiters about having more women especially in the hardware department. And so because of that, I've started to interview more women in the culture fit role to see if they would fit our department culturally and if this would be a good fit for them. But this is just to say, I've been there, I've always been the only female in the room. But I think as long as you bring it up to your managers, people are aware of this fact and they're open to change as long as you kind of voice it.
Good, thanks very much, Mabel. As we start to round the bend toward the end of our conversation here, I want to make sure that we spend a few minutes reflecting on the values question that I think it was Laura who initially raised. One of the things that BC prides itself on is embedding an ethical culture at the university and an exposure to service, to be men and women for others, but also to think holistically about our lives. And of course, in the IS program, ethics has always had one of the core places as a required course and a concentration that you can focus on as well. And so I wonder, as BC grads, how you might reflect on the correspondence between your values and your workplace, your working life, and the values that you've cherished or held onto or built out of Boston College. Do you find that your workplace challenges those? Do you find that your workplace is an affirming place to embody those values? What are the points of inflection that have helped you to say, this is where I can make a difference, or this is how I bring those values to bear, or perhaps this is an environment that I'm struggling with my values in relation to my workplace. So any reflections on that, I think, would be welcome for students here.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick it off and go a little bit more into that, because it's definitely something that's a really important part of my career. And obviously, you know, from what I was taught at Boston College, I think it's so important to anyone who goes to BC. It's one of the biggest reasons I think many people choose the school. So yeah, working in ad tech, I think right now it's a really interesting time where I'm sure many of you have heard of like the technology that we have to track individuals. You know, when it comes to yeah, there was a big article in the New York Times around the geo-targeting capabilities down to basically a few feet of where a user is. You know, what all these companies are doing with all of this user data. So I see that as a huge opportunity to make an impact on an industry that, you know, has access to so much information, and how we're using that information, you know, to actually improve experiences for consumers, for people. You know, there's great ways you can use that information. Obviously, it's you know, helping with a pandemic, for example, and then there's obviously bad actors out there who aren't doing the same thing. So I think that at my company at June Group, we really try to with working groups with other ad tech companies, try to really make sure that we set the bar very high for how we use consumer data, user data, and to make sure that you know, we're flagging bad actors out there when they're not using it properly. I think that it's you know, that it's just one example, like very particularly to my industry, but I think that whatever industry that you go into, there are you know, it's going to be great to have someone from BC there who can kind of ask the right questions and think critically, and you know, make sure that you're bringing your values that we learned at BC to kind of any decision that you're making, whether it's a small decision with, you know, one of the people I'm managing, and you know, how I'm going to handle something that's going on in our day-to-day, or you know, or those big, you know, obviously user privacy issues.
Great, thanks. Sean, do you want to jump in? You're still muted.
My bad. Okay. Yeah, so I guess I could talk a little bit about, I mean, my first job, as I mentioned, I was working at sort of like a government affairs firm, which is sort of a euphemism for consulting / lobbying. But and we had a lot of clients that I really kind of admired, and a lot of good work that we did, including the CEO runs this thing called the Global Fairness Initiative that tries to do sort of microfinance to, you know, help vulnerable populations across the world. At the same time, it's a DC professional firm, and you're sometimes working with clients that maybe aren't your favorite, or, you know, like a somewhat sketchy bank in Eastern Europe that needs regulatory help. And you know, I wouldn't say that I left there just because of those issues, but you know, as it was, I suppose, a factor where there were certain companies I would be working for that I didn't feel fully comfortable helping to represent. And that helped sort of lead me in a different direction and decide that sort of the world of like DC lobbying wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. So I do think it's an important factor to keep in mind. I think BC does a really good job of inculcating those kinds of values, and they're something that you should always be, you should have at the, if not the forefront, then somewhere in the back of your mind when you're making these kind of decisions.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think I would be interested in talking about this. I think I mentioned like ActBlue is a very progressive organization. Like our entire mission is to democratize political power. That was a huge reason why I joined and continue to work there. And so I think that like at the high level, you know, similar to how Laura was talking about, like there's these like bigger notions of like justice and progress in society, but like there's also like small things in your day to day, no matter where you work, that you can do. So I didn't chime in on like when we were talking about like how gender influences like the workplace and technology, but like, you know, there's little things that you can do as an ally, no matter what identities you're bringing to the table, you know, whether it's like I'm hiring right now, for example. And so it's like making sure I'm spending extra effort, you know, making sure that we have like a representative pool of candidates who we're talking to. It could be, you know, maybe someone's work isn't getting highlighted as much as it should for whatever reason. And so making sure you're going out of your way to highlight that. There's just like all sorts of little things you can do to bring, you know, further justice or ethics on a small level that, you know, it doesn't seem like this big, like, you know, thing Plato would write about, or like you would read in a Rawls book, but like is super meaningful to individual people's lives. So I think that like my like takeaway there is like, be aware as you go throughout your like kind of day-to-day 9-to-5 life of like where you can actually make a difference, because you do, it does matter. So.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to this?
I'll have a final note here. I mean, I think Google is a place that repeatedly asks their employees, how are we doing? How have you perceived this? So like taking routine assessments to really kind of check in and understand what the value, if the values of the company are aligning with the employees. So, you know, on a very regular basis, we're doing that exercise to get people comfortable with the fact of reflection and the fact of what does my team look like? Ross, to your point, are we allowing everyone in the room to speak? Are we acknowledging when someone is doing the right thing? That might be really hard. And I think we talked about this earlier, all of us kind of touched on this, but transparency is key. I know, Laura, you said, you know, June means truthful, and however we say it, that aspect of transparency and, you know, being okay with making mistakes or helping someone out and just kind of, you know, leveraging your expertise to guide someone through so that they can understand like what our overall mission is as a company has been my experience within the company that I work for right now. So I feel fortunate that I get to work for a place that does align with my values and aligns with the values that I was taught at BC.
Michelle or Mabel, do you guys want to jump in before we wrap up?
No, I think everyone captured my similar statements.
That's great. No problem. I really appreciate the time and energy you put into this and your reflectiveness. That's I'm sure it's not simply because of your experience at BC. You're reflective, attentive people in your everyday lives before and after Boston College. But it says a lot for our program that the way that you're able to have this kind of reflection and your willingness and generosity to do it on behalf of our students is really admirable. So thank you from the IS program and from me personally for taking the time to talk about your jobs in the tech world and the media world. In the future, we'll be doing different sort of sliced panels and conversations among more sort of micro issues and macro issues and things like that. So I'll keep reaching out to see who's interested at different things. But I know this has been a very broad, you know, industry conversation, but I think we've all seen so much overlap already around the sort of questions and experiences you're having. And I know that the advice that you're giving to students is really terrific. So thank you all for taking the time to be here. Take care of each other, stay safe, and we'll certainly be in touch from Boston College side. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Owens.
Bye.